Good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday. We have an amazing show for everybody today.
Indeed we do.
It's another bro show.
Bro
there
week.
we go. Sad circumstances because one of Crystal's kids is sick, but she will be back. She says that one of her kids is on the mend
Turned
and
the corner,
everything
don't well.
is looking good.
We're
So
happy about
don't
that.
worry about it. But we're going to give her all the time that she needs, and we thank you all for some of the messages that you guys sent in. But before we get to that, man, setting up these stories is tough, especially on a day like today. We have so many things to go over, Ryan and I. Number one, we're going to start with the 2024 race. We're going to go over, since things look like where they're trending for the general election, Biden and Trump. We've known that for a while. We're going to look at some of the things that are good for Biden, some of the things that are bad for Biden, same with Trump and vice versa. Also, some breaking news yesterday. The Texas governor appears to be kind of putting his middle finger in the face of President Biden and the Supreme Court after being ordered to take down some razor wire at the U.S. southern border. This is setting up a possible confrontation with the federal government. Lots of Republican governors backing up Governor Abbott, and this certainly could be a major story on top of what's going on with the border crisis continuing. We're also, Ryan and I, going to break down some of what's happening with the Houthis and continuing war in the Middle East. Biden administration continues to say we're not at war in the Middle East. We just happen to bomb 3 countries in a single day. Boeing, you guys know I love airline stories and everything to do with that. Boeing, the manufacturing crisis and more is just getting way worse for them. Alaska Airlines CEO saying they found multiple doors with loose plugs. And we have confirmation now from the Seattle Times that it was in fact Boeing's fault for misinstalling that door. We're also going to talk about Zyn, nicotine, a subject near and dear to my own heart here, Ryan. And we're going to talk about Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader. He wants to ban Zyn pouches and nicotine. Interesting. He came for Four Loko first, and now he's coming for this. And then Jon Stewart. Jon Stewart is returning to The Daily Show. He'll be the executive producer there, and he'll be hosting the show on Monday, trying to rescue the corpse from what Trevor Noah has left behind. And then finally, Emily Kopp is going to be joining us actually in the studio. She is a phenomenal reporter at the was it Right to Know?
U.S. Right to Know.
U.S. Right to Know.
Yeah,
I've used some of her work here in the past. It's about Lab Leak. Why don't you tell us about it?
I think reasonable debate on this question around COVID origins is over as a result of her latest reporting, which comes from a bunch of FOIA documents that she pulled up. Without teasing too much of it, it's shut.
This is it. Yeah, this is the case. The case is closed. It's been closed for a while in my mind, but Emily is the one who gave us the evidence. So we're going to talk to her. And, again, I want to give total accolades. She has been an absolute warrior on this subject now for a long time. But let's go ahead and begin with the 2024 race. Where do things stand? Exactly. I have been keeping my eye, Ryan, on the Biden HQ website and on their Twitter page in particular, because this has given us a real preview in how the Biden administration is going to be campaigning. And over again, we see a consistent theme: abortion, abortion, Roe, Roe, Roe. That's all they want to talk about, and for good reason. It seems to be the best single electoral thing that they have for them. Here was President Biden just a few days ago in one of a major campaign speech. Here's what he had to say.
Listen to what he says. Trump says he's proud that he overturned Roe v. Wade. He said, and I quote, "There has to be punishment for the women exercising their reproductive freedom." He describes the Dobbs decision as a miracle, but for American women, it's a nightmare. So let's be absolutely clear what Trump is bragging about. The reason there are 21 states where abortion bans are in effect, made with no exception for rape or any other or incest, is Donald Trump.
There you go. So you can see a preview of where things are going. At the same time, President Biden got a pretty good lift yesterday. Ryan, he got the endorsement of the United Auto Workers. Sean Fain, who we've covered a lot here on the show from his time at the strike, he actually delivered that endorsement yesterday. Let's take a listen.
Now, here's what Trump did to help the American auto worker in our 2023 historic stand-up strike now that he's running for president. He went to a non-union plant, invited by the boss, and trashed our union. That's right. And here is what Joe Biden did during our stand-up strike. He heard the call, and he stood up, and he showed up. So that's a choice we face. It's not about who you like. It's not about your party. It's not this bullshit about age. It's not about anything but our best shot at taking back power for the working class.
All right, Ryan, so abortion and unions. Normally, I would say, yeah, that's pretty potent. At the same time, the bullshit about age, I'm not so sure that Mr. Fain should be. Let me ask you this. Would you want Joe Biden, UAW members, would you want him on the line next to you? Or would you want him well into his pension and to his retirement, which you fought very, very hard for in your more recent deal?
UAWs are no different than the rest of Americans in the sense that they don't get a choice. This is it. You got Biden or Trump.
That's true.
And both of these rallies are actually useful windows into the other problem that Biden has, because both of them were disrupted by protests over Gaza.
Over ceasefire.
My colleague Prem Tucker over at The Intercept has a good piece on how there was a lot of dissent within the UAW about the timing of this endorsement, that they wanted, that the UAW has come out for a ceasefire, and there were people inside the UAW who were saying, get the UAW back to its 60s and 70s roots of being a kind of vehicle for social justice broadly. UAW sponsored the March on Washington, for instance. Like they're the ones that financed Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech, and that has been something that has been near and dear to their legacy for decades now. And there was a major disruption at the endorsement ceremony, where the UAW members protesting the president over Gaza. At his speech in Manassas, where the centerpiece of it was abortion rights, again, you had endless disruptions from the audience protesting his support for his unconditional support for Israel's war on Gaza. And so what it's showing is that he can't really go anywhere, for the next year unless he can get to some type of resolution, or they put in a different candidate who's not so closely associated with us. And what kills so many progressives is that it's true. He was the first president to join a picket line. Sean Fain, there's a kind of "that's my president" vibe that he has, and maybe he will be your president one day down the line. He did join Fain on the picket line. They did win a historic contract, and it is true that abortion is on the ballot. Like, all of these things are true, but they're being stained by the blood of so many innocent Palestinians.
I'm glad that you put it that way, because that's like the dichotomy of Biden. And also, even with the union front, wanted to make sure that we flag this. Fain actually, in his speech, even was like, look, some people are not going to vote for Biden. Some people, he's like, and many people even admitted, don't forget this, some 40% of union households went for Trump in 2016. I don't know the exact numbers for 2020. I was struck by Sean O'Brien, who we've actually had here on the show. He's the president of the Teamsters union. He was actually on Fox News yesterday, and he said, listen, we invited Trump. We want to come meet with him, and I think that demonstrates where some of his base actually was. He said a little bit of this yesterday. Let's take a listen.
So we met with Donald Trump 2 weeks ago, and we are meeting with our general executive board and rank and file members at the Teamsters headquarters on January 31st. We've extended the invitation to President Biden. We're talking to the White House now to try and schedule both on the same day. And we think it's important that we're meeting with all candidates. We have a very diverse membership, 1.3 million members. So we owe it to our members to do our due diligence and make the recommendation what's in the best interest of Teamster members nationwide.
There you go. So he's invited President Trump. I mean, he hasn't endorsed him per se or any of that. But I always think these union guys have a much better pulse of politics because they got real memberships that they got to deal with. They got to get reelected. They got to make sure that their constituents are satisfied. Look, most likely he's going to endorse Biden. But the whole point is that even inviting Trump there, I mean, in a certain way, Sean Fain has been a little bit more partisan on that. But Fain, like I said in the speech, is still realistic that he's like, look, not everybody is going to support Biden.
Right.
Some people are going to support Trump.
Right. And the way that it went down with Trump and the strike, with Trump going out and speaking to a non-union crowd, invited by literal management, didn't leave Fain a whole lot of choice. Although the UAW certainly didn't make it easy for Trump to come address. Like, it wasn't as if Trump really he could have dropped in on a picket line, and that could have been interesting, but it wasn't like the UAW leadership was going to make it easy for Trump to show his support. O'Brien is following in the footsteps of this 100-year union legacy of pushing for support from both parties, because whoever's in the White House, working people are going to have interests that they're going to want to push any particular White House, whether it's Trump or somebody else. So by keeping those doors open, that can be useful to Teamsters, the Teamsters members themselves. The best thing, perhaps, that we have about Biden is the NLRB. His appointments to the NLRB have been consistently maybe the most pro-worker in the agency's history, whereas the Republicans on the NLRB continue to vote with bosses, with management against workers. And so there is a push from people like Hawley and others in the Republican Party to create a kind of worker uniparty so that there is power when it comes to the FTC, the FCC, the NLRB, other agencies that you've got kind of Hawley populist right pro-worker Republicans who become commissioners on these boards, and then you've got Democratic pro-worker boards. Because for 40 years, the corporate bosses had the opposite. No matter who was in the White House, corporate America was able to pick who ran these administrative states. So there's a war over the administrative state, and O'Brien kind of being friendly with Trump can help grease some of that.
It's absolutely true, and that's the thing. I mean, Trump, we shouldn't forget, he played footsie rhetorically with the unions. In general, he basically just didn't pay attention to it while he was in the White House, but maybe he will this time. It's very possible he could actually this time around. Returning to abortion, one sign again that this is just going to be front and center for the Biden campaign. Let's go and put this one up there on the screen. Kate Cox, who you will remember, we actually covered her here on the show. The Texas mother who experienced like that nightmare situation where, because of the abortion law, was not able to get an abortion, even though, her fetus was diagnosed with something that was like completely non-viable. It was terminal. It was
terminal diagnosis, and they're like, no, we're not doing anything until it dies, which puts you at extreme risk because you could die from an infection.
Yeah.
Like you have to get that treated immediately. If a fetus dies inside of you, and they're like, no, you just wait until then, and you could get sepsis and die as a result. So she eventually had to leave the state.
She left the state. She became kind of a national figure because of the story, because I believe she was already a mother. She wanted another baby, and so she's kind of the prototypical case for a lot of people in the pro-choice movement, kind of the effects of this. I know the pro-lifers were arguing, and they were like, well, not theoretically, technically, the diagnosis doesn't necessarily mean what it means. I'm not going to sit here and litigate, medical conditions of 21st week fetus, but I will say, politically, I think we've seen enough data to know where this bears out. And I think it's probably a smart move on behalf of the Biden administration. She will be joining Jill Biden at the State of the Union. We will be doing live coverage here of the State of the Union. And, the State of the Union right before the election is always a vehicle for the presidential campaign. If we think back to Trump in the 2019 presidential State of the Union, it was the exact same thing. It was about the immigration. It was anti-impeachment. Some of that was going on, and a lot of it was about the economy, about low interest rates, etc. So these are always a good way to look at things. Now, in terms of the election, something we flagged yesterday that we want to make sure, again, everybody takes away is that while Trump definitely won, and he won by double digits, there's some troubling data for him, and even in the GOP polls. So let's put this up there. Steve Kornacki flagged this. We have never seen a gap, he says, between the independent vote and the Republican vote in the New Hampshire GOP primary like we saw in the New Hampshire primary of Tuesday. Trump won Republicans by 49 points, but Nikki Haley took independents by 22 points. That is a swing of 71. The previous high on that was 40 points. So I just think we all need to pause and maybe just think a little bit about the fact that Nikki Haley was able to dramatically win over these independent voters such that we could view her as a vehicle, as we saw here before. Ryan, how many clips did we play of Haley voters being like, I'm voting for Biden? Right. So if that's a preview of things to come, well, an independent voter or others who were so critical in the 2022 midterms, a lot of them swung Democrat. They don't even like the Democrats. They're not particularly pro-Biden or any of that, but they genuinely are so repulsed both by Stop the Steal and by abortion that they're willing to come out and to vote. And there's something very interesting there where look, I think if you just live your life in online circles, it's hard to put your finger on that, but we always need to remember, even the people who watch the show, the vast majority of the people who watch the show, you're just not, on average, you are not one of the deciding votes whenever it comes to the election.
You probably know who you're voting for.
Yeah, not even if you know who you're voting for. I'm talking about the median voter. Median is like 55 years old and doesn't have a college degree. Just think about that. I mean, it's crazy. They're so much older than the vast majority of people who consume content online. And the fact is that young voters, yeah, I mean, they can affect things on the margins, but in general, like, you people don't vote. And when you don't vote, it's like, well, then your voice is not going to be heard, and the election is going to be decided by people who are way older than you and consume very different media than you. I think that's another critical point I want to put.
If I were going to try to offer Trump some cope, you would say, all right, well, a lot of those Nikki Haley people were actual Democrats.
Right, they're Democrats anyway.
Who became undeclared just so they could mess in the primary. But having covered so many elections, it is extremely rare that shenanigans like that move things beyond on the margins. And so anytime you try to explain things with shenanigans, you're probably going to outsmart yourself. And so you're probably seeing what you think you're seeing, which is that a lot of independents, and even if you take 10, 20% of those and move them aside because they were just a 19-year-old Democrat who voted in the primary, you're still talking a 50-point swing, which we've never seen before. Somebody who wins in a blowout fashion, double digits like that in New Hampshire, usually is going to be at least even or winning with independents, not getting crushed with independents.
The final piece of data I want everybody to take away from this is that things are both looking good and bad for Biden. So this is why we're putting these two things together. Put this up here. So, just yesterday, we saw a new poll, Susquehanna, decent poll out of the state of Pennsylvania, decent sample size and all of that. And what do they find? Biden, 46.8%. Trump, 39.3%. Not sure at 7.6%, and other at 5.6%. So, we got some undecideds there. Enough, if they all went Trump, to put him over the edge. And he definitely did compete in the state pretty well in 2020, and obviously won the state back in 2016. And you should never count him out, especially, I think, in the industrial Midwest. In general, the K&S rule was to add 5 to a Trump number in any of these regions. But here's the thing. In 2022, the K&S rule was reversed. You actually should -5 for Republicans. So that's one of those where that's why it's not really a rule. It's more of a vibe. And, for these, it's just you should say, I don't know. I don't know. You could really read things two ways. So I would look at this and be like, man, Biden, I'm feeling pretty good. But then let's put the next one here up on the screen. How popular is Joe Biden? Well, he's got a 55.7% disapproval rating and a 38.8% approval rating. That's putting him in Jimmy Carter territory going into the general election. He's got a 17-point spread between disapprove and approve. He's been unpopular now for years, for the vast majority of his short presidency. He only was really popular for a year, and as you can see from that trend line, things did not go well for him. October 2021 really is, I think, just such a turning point for the Biden presidency, because it's the chaos of Afghanistan. And by the way, I supported Afghanistan. I actually supported withdrawal. But let's be real, politically, it was a disaster. Let's all just be honest about that. Media bears responsibility, but Biden does too, just for the total chaos. But on top of that, that was in the midst of like vax craziness, COVID craziness, the Delta variant, diapers,
9% inflation.
Exactly, there were 9% inflation. And it's just never recovered from that. So I could look at this thing truly two ways. The 2022 data, I'd be like, okay, I would not feel great if I was Biden. I would feel okay. And then I could look at it the other way, and in any traditional metric with the economy where it is and everything else, and I would say, man, Biden is going to get, absolutely creamed in the election. So it's one of those where we're going to continue to try and present this case. I just encourage everyone, don't live in a bubble and try to look at contravening data and just mess with it in your head. Yeah. Don't have to draw a conclusion of either or, just anything could happen. Yeah. That's my main takeaway.
What's been so interesting to see is that consumer confidence and people's feelings about the economy have absolutely exploded in the last 2 months.
Yes, that's right. The last 3 months in particular.
You're seeing the biggest swings in an upward direction, perhaps, than you've seen since they started looking at the data. And so if that continues, that's extremely helpful for Biden, because then you would have a year of people feeling good about the economy, and which could be enough time for a lot of people to recover a lot of what they lost through inflation and the precarity of 2021.
Yeah.
So, this is a wide open race, even though both people ought to lose.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've said that. It's pathetic that either has a 50% chance.
Yeah.
And yet, that's the situation.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.